the housing market may be doing better than you think. I know that might sound surprising, especially if you've been following the headlines lately. But I've been looking through the June numbers from our local MLS, and halfway through 2026, more homes have sold. Sale prices are higher, homes sold faster in June, inventory is down, and sellers are getting closer to their original asking price, all compared with a year ago. Now, before anyone gets too excited, I'm not saying we suddenly have a booming real estate market. We don't. And there are still some numbers we need to keep an eye on. But when we compare where Northeast Florida housing market is today with where it was a year ago, I think the results may surprise some people. So let's take a look at the actual numbers and see what's really happening in our market halfway through 2026. Let's start with home sales. During June, 2,848 homes were sold in our market. That's actually an increase of just over 2% compared with June of last year. And when we look at the first 6 months of 2026, we see almost exactly the same thing. Year-to-date home sales are also up a little more than 2%, compared with the first half of 2025. Now, is that a dramatic increase? No, but that's not really the point. The point is that slightly more homes have sold this year than during the same period last year. So, despite everything we've heard about a slowing housing market, buyers are still buying homes. And that brings us to prices. The median sale price in June was $375,000. That's almost 5% higher than June of last year. And for the first half of 2026, the median sale price was $360,000. That's an increase of nearly 3% compared with the first half of 2025. So now we have two pieces of the puzzle. More homes have sold, and the median sale price has increased. Again, I wouldn't call it a booming housing market, but I also wouldn't call it a market that's falling apart. Another interesting number is how long homes are taking to sell. In June, the average days on market was 72 days compared with 78 days last June. The median was 36 days compared with 43 days a year ago. So homes actually sold a little faster this June than they did last June. But there's an important distinction here. Homes are selling. That doesn't mean every home is selling quickly. Pricing matters. Condition matters. Location matters. And how a home is marketed matters. In fact, I would argue that those things matter more today than they did several years ago. During the pandemic market, you could put almost anything on the market and probably find a buyer. Today's buyers are much more selective, and sellers need to understand that. Now, let's look at inventory, because this may be one of the more interesting changes in the market. At the end of June, there were 10,215 active listings. That's down more than 18% compared with June of last year. And fewer homes are coming onto the market. New listings in June were down about 6.5% compared with last June. For the first half of the year, new listings are down more than 10%. So while buyer demand has certainly changed from what we experienced several years ago, the supply of homes coming onto the market has also declined. And that helps explain another number I watch closely: the absorption rate. Last June, we had 5.35 months of inventory. This June, that number has dropped to 4.26 months. Simply put, if no additional homes came onto the market, it would theoretically take about a little over 4 months to sell the current inventory at the present sales pace. And that's a significant improvement from where we were a year ago. This is also a good example of why we can't judge the housing market based on one number. Buyer demand is important, but so is the number of homes available for those buyers to purchase. The relationship between supply and demand is what ultimately shapes the market. There's another number I think is worth mentioning: the percentage of the original asking price sellers are receiving. Last June, homes were selling for about 93.4% of their original asking price. This June, that number is approximately 95%. So buyers may still have negotiating opportunities, but sellers, on average, are getting closer to their original asking price than they were a year ago. Now there's one number I think deserves some attention: pending sales. Pending sales in June were down almost 25% compared with June of last year. That's a significant decline. However, when we look at the entire first half of the year, pending sales are down only a little more than 2%. So I'll be watching that number closely over the next several months. Was June simply a slow month? Or are we beginning to see a change in the direction of the market? Right now, I don't think we have enough information to answer that question. And that's why I think it's important not to make decisions based on one number or one month. We have to look at the market as a whole. So where does the Northeast Florida housing market stand halfway through 2026? We've had slightly more home sales, higher median sale prices, homes sold faster in June, inventory is lower, the absorption rate has improved, and sellers are receiving a higher percentage of their original asking price. At the same time, pending sales slowed considerably in June, and affordability continues to influence buyer decisions. So I wouldn't describe this as a hot market, and I certainly wouldn't describe it as an easy market. But based on the numbers, I also don't believe the market is as bad as some of the headlines might lead people to believe. And that brings us back to where we started. The housing market may be doing better than you think. The reality is that real estate is local, and even within Northeast Florida, market conditions can vary considerably depending on the neighborhood, the price range, and the type of property. So if you're thinking about buying or selling a home, the most important question isn't simply, how is the housing market? The better question is, what is happening in the part of the market that affects me? And that's a question I'm always happy to help you answer. I'm Lucian Valancourt with Native Son Realty. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next market update.